Because how can you define anything nowadays?
You can't.
Like literally every definition changes in 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
Like, you know, hearing how everyone's pushing back on like the NAACP's definition of like what you can say to people of color.
Mm-hmm.
They allow people of color, but you're not allowed to say colored people.
Right.
You know? But like on their website, that's what they say you're supposed to say. But in reality, like if you say colored, it sounds weird, right?
Yeah, it does. It sounds wrong.
Like I went into a party and it was full of colored people. It's like, you sound like a racist.
That sounds awful. Yeah.
So there's this like weird kind of like morph and definitions of anything, right?
Yes. Yeah,
well,
that's why we have to just keep kind of always learning.
Always learning and keeping an open mind and being empathetic.
Open mind. And I think the most important thing in all of this is listening to other people. I was having this conversation with a good friend of mine actually about racism, and I don't want to get too much into it because that's a real heavy topic. But he's from Hong Kong, and so he was talking about the whole Asian hate thing happening, and it was just interesting. And I think we just kind of boiled it down to, as a white person, it's my job just to kind of shut up and listen when people talk about their experiences. Do you know what I mean? Like I can't understand what people have been through, so I just have to listen and understand. And when someone tells me they want to be addressed in a certain way, then in all ways, not just even race, gender, everything. When someone says this is how I want to be treated, then you go, you're right. This is not my job to say yes or no. Yeah. And I should respect that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's, you know, there's a lot that white people need to learn about race.
Yes.
Right. Like, you know, I dated a person of color for 3 years. Mm-hmm. And I had lived together for 2 years of the 3. And, you know, I had some kind of crazy racist experiences.
Really?
Yeah.
Sad.
Like in a restaurant, you know, like where I nearly fucking jumped over the bar.
Jeez.
You know, like we ordered like eggs and bacon. Mm-hmm. And this guy shows up with the slimiest, thinnest, most pathetic slice of bacon.
Right.
And it wasn't cooked. And it was just shit. And, you know, and so I'm like, hey man, please, can you bring this back and return it? And he's giving this whole like weird glare, you know, like weird energy, kind of like we're a problem, like asking us for our credit card ahead of time. And it just became into this whole thing. And, you know, I had words with him, you know, and it took me a while to recognize what was happening.
I was about to say, how does this come down to race? I'm confused.
Because it's never like obvious. Well, it's not that it's never obvious, but most of the time it's not obvious. Like most of the time it's like this undercurrent, this like subterfuge
yeah.
of the way they approach you, you know, to like, it's so strange, you know, it's like a paranoia too, right? It's like, really, is this happening? I mean, I don't know.
Well, you don't want to jump to conclusions, but when you're right, you're right. Do you know what I mean? When someone has like a racial motivation, or like not even that, what's the word when they have like a preconceived notion about someone because of their race, and sometimes you don't pick it up because you don't want to be that person to be like, are they really behaving that way because of this?
Yeah.
But
it's so strange, you know. Maybe it was because of one of my first actual times that has happened, that I've like witnessed that, that I didn't understand it so fully. But, you know, I could feel my partner shrinking.
I was gonna say, I'm sure your partner knew what was going on though, because
and
this
that's
wasn't
why,
the first time
totally.
that they'd experienced this.
And that was one of the first indications where I was like, oh, this is more than what I think, you know, because I could feel, and her energy is enormous. Yeah. So the fact that she's shrinking, I was like, oh my God, you know, and that just fucking threw me over the edge. Yeah. Like it's so weird. Like I don't understand it. You know, my whole life, like even growing up in the South, you know, I saw it, but I always hang out with whatever, you know, some of my best friends, right? You know, like I never understood it. And man, it's just like, it's one of those things where like you really think about it and it breaks your heart. Yeah. Because it doesn't add up, you know, like none of it adds up. There's no real explanation to it. And there's so much effort putting in to perpetuate it. You know, it's uncomfortable. And maybe I'm not the guy to talk about it, you know, but like maybe I can talk about, well, you know what happened recently? What? I showed you those texts. Someone was racist towards me, you know?
Yeah, but that's an interesting conversation in itself, because then there's the whole discussion about, can you be racist towards someone who's white?
Yes.
Because racism, if you look at the definition of racism, is the systemic mistreatment of someone who's a minority. And as a white man, you're not a minority.
That's not the definition.
If you look at the definition of racism, it's the mistreatment. And
since when? I'm going to challenge that.
This is the definition of changed. There's a whole discussion going on right now of can you be racist to someone
ridiculous.
who's white?
That's ridiculous.
Because
racism is your prejudice to someone by their race, period.
Because they have never faced
doesn't matter
systemic hatred or being mistreated or judged because of their race by society as a whole. And if you look
not true for all white people.
And I looked this up because I was curious about this myself, actually, because I was reading a whole article about can you be racist towards people who are white, and they were talking about. And I looked at the definition of racism, and it talks about to a minority group.
See, I think that's a disingenuous definition, because there are white people who are, treated poorly because they're of their race. The difference is that we just have been dominating the conversation and the cause of racism for so long. It's kind of like, stop bitching. Oh, sorry, you caught some racism, white guy.
You've never in your life had a job taken away from you.
I'm not comparing the
No, I know. I'm just saying people who are white have never had jobs taken away, never had housing limited.
No,
due to
they haven't
race.
been redlined.
Yeah,
I'm not disagreeing with that at all. But what
I'm
saying is, if we're already creating a special class of any race whatsoever, right? Any race. I don't stand behind that, right? Of course, someone can be racist to a white person. Of course, someone walks up to you, calls you fucking honky, spits at your feet and punches you in the face. What, because you're white, that's not racism?
Has that ever happened to you?
No, but it's happened to people. White people in hood areas. Are you kidding? Of course.
I don't know.
But the difference is that white people are in the White House and have caused hundreds of years of, racist policy. So it's kind of relax. What are you going to complain about it? That's the truth.
You may be able to experience a racist action, as in someone but you've never experienced. Maybe this is the difference, right? And
I see what you mean.
You've never experienced racism,
right? Systemic,
yes.
The whole world.
And I think that's the big difference,
right? That makes sense.
If someone comes up to you and calls you a cracker, you're like,
right, that was racist, but also I get to go home to my Brooks Brothers.
Right, exactly. But you've never had a family history where you've been mistreated. Right. It's a whole different
situation. Or you
situation.
Can't look up your family history because we wipe the records.
Exactly. It's a whole different system. So I think that's the biggest.
Right.
And systemic racism is the crux of it, how unfair society is towards different races. But there's also within that, and I will say this, and I was reading another article about this too. I've been reading a lot about this lately. It's super interesting. That we forget the world isn't just people who are black and people who are white. There are tons of other races out there that experience racism from different groups, from different cultures, in all forms. It's a huge global issue.